for who.
No, just because.
Okay.
I won't be making it. I can't believe you're saying that, because my son just wrote me and said that there's a university.
Call the meeting to order. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We'll just stand for a moment of silence. Okay, thanks, everyone. Roll call, please, Beth.
Mayor Kavanaugh,
Here.
Councilmember Yates,
Present.
Councilmember Leger,
Here.
Councilmember Brown,
Here.
Vice Mayor Hanson,
Here.
Councilmember Dickey,
Here.
and Councilmember Elke is absent today.
Okay, I just got a quick, short report. Ken Buchanan and I both attended the Joint Planning Advisory Council meeting held in Chandler that consisted of members from the Maricopa Association of Governments, the Central Arizona Governments, and the Pima Association of Governments. It was an opportunity to hear regional updates from the cities of Tucson, Globe, Casa Grande, and Mesa dealing with economic opportunities for Arizona. There was also a state land review presented by State Land Commissioner Vanessa Hickman and an update for Mayor Lopez Rogers on extending the border zone in Arizona to promote tourism. Phoenix presented its plans for their new global commerce center called the Phoenix Mart, a unique concept to connect North American industries with domestic and global buyers. Phoenix is hoping that they will be able to add 10,000 jobs once this is in operation. Besides these interesting presentations to bring us up to date on what's going on in and outside the Valley, it was a good opportunity to network with other mayors and managers on issues that we have in common. Thank you. Do we have any speaker cards?
No, Mayor.
All right, then we'll go right into our consent agenda. We have 4 items as listed. Can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda as listed?
Mayor, so moved.
In a second, please.
Second.
Roll call.
Councilmember Dickey,
Aye.
Councilmember Leger,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Hanson,
Aye.
Councilmember Yates,
Aye.
Councilmember Brown,
Aye.
Mayor Kavanaugh.
Aye.
Mayor 6-0.
Thank you. Regular agenda items, number 5, consideration of a professional services agreement with DLR Group Incorporated in the amount of $105,250 for design development, construction documents, bid negotiation, construction administration, and civil engineering for Fountain Park Phase 6. Brian.
Good evening, Mayor, council members, and Happy New Year. We're here tonight to consider the professional services agreement with DLR Group. As you recall, last month we had a presentation about the kind of the scope of work of Fountain Park and where we're at on Phase 6. So tonight I just have a presentation to clarify a couple items, get a little bit more direction, and hopefully move forward with a contract with DLR Group to get the project moving so that we're on track to be under construction during the summer months. So as we discussed last time, the master plan was approved in 1998, and this is the final phase of improvements in the master plan. We've done 5 so far, a little over $4 million in improvements. This particular phase is to be about $1.5 million in improvements, and it consists of 7,400 linear feet of pathway lighting, improvements to the east parking lot, monument signage, 2 regular with lighting, 1 with lighting and an LED display, possibly, interpretive and rule signage, and electrical upgrades to the amphitheater. The professional services agreement, again, we selected DLR Group because of David Case. He's our landscape architect, has been with us since day 1 on the Fountain Park project, brings a lot of history and knowledge, and we think that group's the perfect architect to kind of finish this project up with us. And again, the contract total is $105,250. Again, we have a map that kind of shows the areas that we'll be working on for the improvements. The yellow is the pathway lighting project. The pink areas are the monument signage, and then there's some bright blue ones in the, let me highlight this. These are some of the signage areas that we would put rural signage and some interpretive signage. Obviously the east parking lot. And then we have an additional scope, project scope, which is the fountains in the lake that we'll talk about a little bit more later. Again, one of the things that we talked about for quite a bit of time last time was the monument signage and whether or not we wanted to have an LED display to kind of announce upcoming events. So I wanted to give you guys an idea. I just went back and did a little bit more research about what that might look like if that's something we choose to go forward with. On the left here, you'll see what was originally kind of a monument signage conceptual design that probably dates back to about 1998. So this might not be exactly what it looks like, but this is very similar to what we have at Four Peaks Park and at Golden Eagle Park. So I wanted to kind of give you an idea what that potentially could look like. But then on the right is a monument signage that includes an LED display. And there's a number of different ways you can construct these and incorporate an LED display. That's just one example for you guys to take a look at. I found another graphic when I was researching the LED displays just to kind of give you a little bit more information as far as line spacing and which kind of size of a display might be an option for us if we choose to go forward with that. We're probably in this area right here, which is the 20 millimeter. And that kind of, you can see on this, it's up a little bit higher, but it also covers couple of lanes of traffic. So given the proposed location, that's kind of where we're potentially looking at that size sign and the spacing there. Back to the recommended location. We've got it on the master plan as showing as Saguaro Boulevard and Palisades Boulevard, and this is a view looking out from that intersection where that sign would go. And as you can see, it really pretty much just faces the intersection and the businesses right there, but it's an intersection of two main arterial streets. The location's traveled by residents and visitors, and according to the 2010 traffic counts, we get almost 21,000 cars there on an average weekday. So I'm sure some of those people are passing back and forth, so it might not be 21,000 different people, but it's a good number of people that would see any sign and be able to view it from either stopped while they're there or at the speed they're going, they'd probably be able to read at least what's up there immediately. And then in looking from that viewpoint, when you look on the corner, there's little to no impact on the neighbors in that area with the direction that we'd be facing this. One of the other locations that we looked at after Councilwoman Hanson, Vice Mayor Hanson kind of brought up some options was Saguaro Boulevard and Avenue of the Fountains. And again, this is the view from that location. Again, it's an intersection of two main streets, still traveled by residents and visitors. The traffic count's a little bit lower there. We're about 17,600 cars, still able to be viewed by vehicular and pedestrian traffic, and little, if any, impact on nearby residents. This is a stop sign, so it's a little more stop and go than at this traffic light where they might be there for a little bit longer and be able to see more information. And again, the objective of the LED display is to announce upcoming events and activities at Fountain Park, primarily at Fountain Park, but other events around town could be listed on there, whether that's something that happens at the community center, the extravaganza over at Golden Eagle Park, whatever the activity may be that we want to get the information out to everybody. And again, we're targeting vehicular traffic, not necessarily pedestrian traffic in the park. And per the town code, I know there was some concern about evening hours. Messages are in 8-second intervals, but beginning at 10 p.m., the background must be darker than the text. Message interval has to stop, so it would just be one message, whatever that may be, whether it's the time and the date, and the temperature maybe, and the message interval can resume at dawn. So that's a little bit more information on the LED display that's being proposed. We also wanted to just make sure that we were sure about what you guys were thinking as far as bollards versus poles for the pathway lighting. Staff is recommending the bollards as well as the landscape architect due to the fact that they're lower to the ground. It's less intrusive lighting, more fixtures, but they're a little bit closer together, and it's possible to spec something like a concrete bollard which is pictured. This is right in front of the community center to give you an idea of what we might be looking at. We're thinking that something like that, or maybe even a stainless steel type bollard would be able to handle the effluent water and some of the other stuff that happens down there. And again, just on the other side, poles are a little bit taller, lighting similar to parking lot lights, less fixtures further apart. And lastly, one of the additions to the project that we're looking for potentially is floating fountains. This was something that came up a couple times in the last few months, and then I got some more information on it when I was at the National Recreation and Parks Conference in October. And there's a lot of benefits to it, I think. Number one, it improves the look and feel of the lake. It aids in aeration of the lake, particularly in the coves where algae typically forms. And one of the reasons we're thinking about this right now is the electrical could share the trenches being dug for the pathway lighting, so when we're going all the way around, we can put in some extra conduit and wiring. But that being that it's an addition to the project, we'd be looking potentially for some funds out of the Fountain Lake Water Quality Improvement budget in the Capital Projects Fund. So with that, our recommendation is to approve the contract with the DLR Group as presented and just get a little bit more direction again on the LED sign, the bollard lighting, and the possible addition of the floating fountains to the project. Be happy to answer any questions.
Okay. I just have two quick ones. How many fountains are you talking
We
about?
were looking at, let me go back to that graphic. We were looking at trying to get to the coves where sometimes the algae is a little bit more, builds up a little bit more. So back by near the amphitheater, another one right there, kind of by one of the island, in between the islands. One over in the cove near the plaza, and then possibly one over on the northeast side, and then one down by the Veterans Memorial, so 5 total.
Okay. How tall are they?
They range in height. They can go from anywhere from 10 to 15 feet up to 30, 40. So we haven't necessarily decided what would work best for that area because we'd probably want to make sure that it's not going out any further than the perimeter of the lake. So
Okay.
it's just the power requirements are the same regardless of what height you get.
Okay, thanks, Brian. Anything here? Okay.
Madam.
Anything here?
Thank you.
Councilman Yates.
Happy New Year, Brian.
Happy New Year.
We're just approving the concepts and the budget.
Correct.
The design group will come back with the exact ballard that they're proposing.
Correct.
And some LED options and whether or not we even want to pursue. I know we had lots of discussion with regard to the LED, et cetera, but we're not approving necessarily an LED tonight. We're approving them to come up with some concepts and present them.
Correct. We're looking for a little bit more direction so that they're not doing too much extra work on a
Right.
design. If it's something we don't want to pursue at all, I don't want them, wasting any time and focusing on what we have at hand. But if you desire, we could get a couple of concepts if we think that's something we want to move forward with and bring it back at a later date.
Madam Mayor, to keep that conversation, I love LEDs and what they're meant for, but again, just for this beautiful fountain park, I just don't know if that's the image. Definitely, we need something saying, hey, this Thursday, we have this going on, that going on. And I know there was lots of discussion about putting it out on Shea for the obvious reasons. We have 32,000 cars per day, of which are a lot of out-of-towners, which would kind of bring people in. But I'm open to having that discussion.
Councilman Brown?
Thank you. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
So, you drive by the high school, and every time you drive by the high school, you look at their little LED sign that tells you what's going on, whether they're having tests or whether they're out of school, and it's not offensive. And it's a good way to communicate with the public. And hence, if we're going to talk about an LED sign, I think we should start with a simple basis like that, opposed to something like we look at Four Peaks that lights up the center part of town all by itself. And so if we are going to be talking about LEDs, I think just an information sign that not quite like what we see out on the corner of Shea and the Beeline that the tribe puts on, but something that's a nice, calm, polite information sign to keep the people, the local people, informed as to what's going on at the fountain. And if I could touch on the
Sure.
floating fountains, cute. And that's about as far as I'll take it.
Okay.
I truly believe that it may have, and I wouldn't be knowledgeable enough to say that that's what we want to do. I think before we make any kind of a decision like that, we should discuss this with some engineers that can tell us how much water we really need to move, what it's really going to cost to operate and to maintain them, or if there's a better value for the $300,000 in the water control system.
Mayor?
Councilwoman Dickey?
Thank you, Mayor. The LED lights, you know, I really am not in favor of those on Saguaro. Obviously, we're talking funding when we talk about putting signs there, and we've been talking a lot about putting them out on Shea. If we're thinking in terms of saving some money on a project that maybe we could use the lights to do something on Shea, I would much rather do that with all the other outside people that would see it. Plus, I think the idea of putting a pretty limited one over by the Fountain Park, you know, we do a lot of events that aren't in the park, and it just seems to me that since money is always an object that we have to take into consideration, I'd rather not put an LED sign into this project and put it in, save that money for Shea, or, you know, like what you said about the fountains, they're cute, but again, and I'm all for anything that gets visitors or makes it more interesting and nice, but I'm not sure that taking the budgetary money out of the water quality money, it wouldn't be better spent in something that is really devoted to fixing the quality of the water. That's kind of a lot of money, $300,000, and then I'm really glad what you brought up, because the electricity, when we talked about having the fountain even beyond, that was the thing that was cost prohibitive. So if we're laying something for something that's going to be a pretty high annual amount, we really need to have a lot more information, in my opinion, before we do that. Not that I'm opposed to fountains, though, to make this a nice thing. And if we can save money on a sign to help towards that, I'm fine with that. The last thing is we had some input from people on path lighting that was looked like a glowing kind of a thing. So there were 2 emails and letters we got from that. And then there were letters to the editor that were addressing LED signs. So we have been hearing from people who are a little bit unhappy with the idea of an LED sign. And last week there was a letter to the editor about other improvements we can make to the park as far as keeping it clean and things like that, that I think that we are going to be addressing. So just wanted to make sure that the folks that have been contacting us, and since it's been the holidays, that we have checked them and then we are reacting to these things. Thanks.
Brian, was the reason for putting in the fountains based on some study that you did concerning the aeration of the lake, or was there any engineering done?
Not specifically. If that's something that you want us to maybe look into a little bit more, we'd contact Rick Amalfi, our water quality expert, and also get a little bit more information on exactly what these fountains do as far as aeration and things like that. Again, we don't know that it will solve the entire problem, because these are floating, so they're basically handling surface water, but it can't hurt. So we could definitely do a little bit more research to get that information, if that's something you guys want us to do. Right now, it's just a conceptual idea.
Okay. Anyone on this side? Vice Mayor.
And going along with everyone else, and I was wondering if you talked to Mr. Amalfi about this, because my recollection was when we were having these discussions a year or 2 ago, that, you know, while aesthetically pleasing, they don't really get down and mix like, you know, something underneath the water would do. So if we were going to go that route, I think we'd have to recognize that it's probably more for aesthetics rather than effectively curing any water problems. I like the rendering you gave us with the light, the combination of the LED light and the monument sign. I think that, you know, for an LED, it helps to kind of tone it down a little bit because it's combining the monument sign with it. But I agree with Ginny that if it's an either-or thing, I'd rather see that type of signage out on Shea, because I think we'd get a bigger bang for the buck.
And Councilman Leger.
Thank you. Brian, in that you're looking for recommendations, I'm not in favor of the LED at the park. I think we'd get more bang for our buck in terms of saving those dollars, reallocating those funds to Shea Boulevard. With respect to the bollards, I like the notion that you're considering the concrete and that everything metal, et cetera, just totally deteriorates in the park area. If the council feels comfortable going with an LED, it's perhaps something I could get behind at the park, but I think we'd get more bang for our buck coming off of Shea Boulevard. With respect to location, if we get to that point, I think where you recommended the LED or the monument sign is the appropriate place. What would concern me from a traffic engineering perspective is that if you've ever spent any time observing human behavior or traffic behavior at that four-way stop sign, people have a hard enough time negotiating that, let alone trying to pay attention to pedestrians. I certainly wouldn't want them paying attention to the sign, but as you stated at Palisades, it makes more sense. But I don't want to send a mixed message. It depends on, where the majority council wants to go. A toned-down version with just a banner of LED is something perhaps I could support and get on board with. And lastly, just to support what I've heard here this evening, we've talked, as Cassie mentioned, over the last couple of years of enhancing water quality, and more specifically before this council and other councils, that was aerators. And aerators, from an engineering perspective, are designed specifically to do that, and I think that's what we need to do to enhance water quality. And then if the money is dedicated for that, I would have a hard time supporting the other floating, the floating fountains. And I mention that now because it looks as if you're asking for some clarity as we go into the design phase, because if we were going with the floating fountains, that would have to be incorporated into the design, or how we would go about that. Is that correct?
Correct. It would be something we'd have to engineer separately, but the idea was that if we're trenching, now might be a good time to add that conduit.
And Mary, just one more point. If that's the case, it would seem like we would need to come up with a definitive answer tonight, either yes or no, on moving in.
Well, we have a little bit of time. They can move forward with some of the other design elements. And again, if we know we're putting in a trench, that can be added later. It's just, like I said, adding, figuring out what the power needs are and making sure that there's space in the electrical boxes for that type of stuff.
And once again, not to put you on the spot, but I don't have the answer to this question, but I believe we need to look at the efficiency. I think by default, I believe the aerators would serve that as their purpose.
Sure.
And I think you'd probably get less than that from the floating fountains. Thank you, Mary.
Brian, I'm not sure if this is a question for you or maybe for Ken. Is the LED, the money that we have for the monument sign with the LED as we see it here, if we just did the monument sign without the LED, would there be enough money to put an LED sign on Shea, or would that require additional funds?
It's unknown at this time, depending on where we're going to put it and what type of LED sign we're looking at Shea. It's a totally different project. So we would have to go back and develop the scope on that and location.
Okay.
But what I'm hearing you say is, if I'm gathering from what I'm hearing from the combination of discussions from the council members, is that you prefer bollards rather than the light standards.
Yeah.
And that the no LED sign on the at the park at this time, and would rather look for another project for another LED sign to be considered out on Shea as a separate project, if there's any funds left of this project. And then lastly, the fountains, without having adequate information to show more of a mixing as well as aeration, because a mixing is as important as that. The fountains won't be able to help mix; they'll just aerate. So that those three things, from what I'm hearing, shouldn't be part of this project at this time, and stick with the original.
Okay. Councilman Yates?
My only, when we studied the running of the fountain last year, and we spent, basically $250,000 just turning the fountain on every hour on the hour for 15 minutes, I'm along the lines of what Councilman Brown said about the efficiency. especially considering that it's not doing the full package, just running these fountains is probably going to be cost prohibitive, especially during those times. So I'm leaning that same way, that unless you can come back and say, hey, we can do it this way, it's going to mix, aerate, and only add 20% to the budget, that's kind of that direction. I'm now leaning more towards what Councilman Brown said about a simple LED sign, because I know those are very, very effective, just the basics of letting somebody know. And I think what we're talking about is whatever that line item budget is for signs, monument, LED, or the like, if you can ask them to leverage that into package A, package B, package C kind of thing. Package A being or no LED sign and we'll put it all out on Shea, or a very simple, hey, this Thursday is the farmer's market on Avenue, this Friday is this, because I think that is something extremely important for just the people who live in town and might not get out on Shea, to keep us informed, and then leverage that. But I like the idea of doing something along the lines of both. I was just, from that last presentation a couple weeks ago, I was just picturing not quite the Jumbotron, but something more along those lines, and I just didn't see that as a perfect fit for that image of Fountain Park.
Well, just to clarify too, when you think about Fort McDowell's display at the end of the Shea, that's full color graphics, everything. We were never proposing something along those lines. In fact, again, if we can take a look at the one in the graphic here, it's color, but it's still very simple. It's not, I think the colors are pretty basic as far as what you can do on that. But there are options where you can just go one color, two. We can look at a couple different things if it's something that we might consider.
Is this something like what Peaks Fitness has out front?
I think this is kind of, again, a step below Fort McDowell, but a step up maybe a little bit from Peaks, but very similar.
Mayor.
Councilwoman Dickey?
Thank you. Just so you know that I've had complaints of the one in front of that church that's on Saguaro, kind of close to Shea, which is very simple. So it's not something that's not noticed by people. Obviously, the sign ordinance does allow things, but even that, which is just the one, the other part of this has to do with maybe we don't have it on at night. So, I think we might have some other options. I'm just generally not in favor of it on Saguaro, but if we end up that the majority does decide they want an LED sign there, I hope that we'd be open to discussing not doing it at night at all, because probably nothing is going on at that time, and maybe the need wouldn't be so apparent.
I hate the idea of having an either or. I mean, if I have to choose, I'm going to choose Shea, only because we've heard from the business community that they need to bring people in for the events, and probably a lot of that traffic that goes up and down Saguaro is also headed for Shea. And I heard from Charlotte McCluskey with the farmers market in the last meeting. Phyllis Kern was here, and Christine Colley, who runs the Oktoberfest. They're trying to get people into town, and they see that as really necessary, since the center of town where all activity happens is off the beaten path. So people kind of get lost between Shea and trying to find Fountain Park. So I hate to be put in a situation that's an either or, because it's nice to have information there for our just people who live there. But if it's choice, I would rather have it on Shea, because I think that's where it's going to be the most effective. Vice Mayor?
Ken, can you remind me what the time frame is for the work that we're going to be doing on Shea and Saguaro, and from technology on Shea, from technology out to 89? I mean, because that's.
So I'll have, and if I misspeak, I'll have Mr. Mood come up and help me with this. But right now, we're trying to have that call for bids in the spring, and hopefully in the summer we'll be able to have that asphalt and that signal, the asphalt replacement from technology to B-line in the summer, with that signal replacement at the same time.
Could some additional signage kind of be worked into that project?
If we have funds available for this, that sign out on Shea is going to be a little bit different than this sign.
Right.
It's going to be much bigger,
Right.
and the location is going to be critical, and we really haven't got into where we think that ought to go. So we need to explore a scope on that type of a sign, and we haven't done that.
But it's something that we could maybe roll into that, so it wouldn't be like an either or? You know, let the park signage be part of the park project and the other signage be part of the street project.
Sure.
Well, just like
Sure.
the traffic light.
Councilman Brown.
Thank you, Mayor. I think we should start by finding out what the signs cost, just some general costs of something like in front of the Baptist church, a very simple sign, and maybe then contact the fort and find out what that cost. Then somewhere in between, then we'll have a feel for how much money we're actually looking at spending. I don't have a clue as to what they cost. And the simple ones, I think, are fairly inexpensive. So I think that's the way I'd like to go.
Councilman Yates.
I have done the big jumbotrons on some shopping centers, and they can be costly. I did one on Buckeye, right in front of right before the airport, that's roughly $80,000, and but it has a beautiful base to it and stonework. But you're right, the very simple ones that are in front of the schools and the churches, you know, a few $1,000s. That's why I think if you come back with just kind of two options, if it's a line item budget, and then the council at that time can decide, you know, yes or no. But I agree with our town manager, we probably need to do some more work. But what can we do tonight that won't stop you but still give you some direction?
Well, Mayor Kavanaugh, Councilmember Yates, what I'm looking for tonight really is, we still want to get the design group going.
Right.
Almost everything else, I mean, this is, again, a small part of the project. If we approve the contract tonight, they can get rolling on that. I can ask them to present a couple options. We can get maybe some cost estimates on a couple LED signs, bring it back to you and say, you know, this is a little bit more specific what we're looking at. And again, they're going to design the monument base to be pretty similar no matter what corner it goes on. So all we're doing, again, is probably just putting something on top. So it's not going to change the design a whole lot. It will just change maybe some power requirements, things like that, because we are going to have uplights on all the monument signs. We may just have to run a little bit, you know, an extra breaker or something to run this LED. So again, it doesn't really affect the design contract. So I think we can move forward with that. We can pursue some options on that, and then as far as the bollards and the fountains, you know, we'll do some more research, but it sounds like, you know, we don't want to move forward with that right now until we know the exact effects. And then bollard lighting, I didn't hear anybody disagree with that, and so I think we can move forward with that as part of the design too.
Okay.
Well, Mayor,
Councilman Brown?
Oh,
Oh, I'm sorry.
members of the council, you have three things on the, you know, you've got the project itself, but now you've got three things that I think you need to vote on. You know, do you want to do the fountains or not? Right now, I can tell you that it's not going to address everything that we need to do. Okay, it's like Councilmember Brown said, it's going to be for making it cute. Okay, it's going to help a little bit aeration, obviously, but that's not going to solve the problem of what we have there. And we're still working with sanitary district on everything else with that. Okay, and we haven't got that far down the road with that part of it, that we do need to do other systems in there that helps mix it up as well as aerate. Those bollards, I think I'm hearing everybody pretty much general say, yes, that's what we need to do, not do the lamps. But then you've got the LED sign. We can certainly bring that back at a separate time to find out. We can put it in the project for this to be designed. You can always stub out another electrical service for it if, in case you change your mind in the future to do it during this project. We can bring some examples back to you. But I think we need to get this project going. And I think we need to make some decisions on these three things.
Okay.
I'll make a motion.
Okay, thank you.
So I move to put the fountains in another category and another project sometime. I move to examine the price of the LED lights. And I would also agree that we should put the bollards in and not the standard lights and a concrete. And I move to approve the professional service agreement as presented with those exceptions.
Second.
All right. Were there any speaker cards on this?
No, Mayor.
Okay, any further council discussion?
Mayor, just want to say that I appreciate that, because I know Councilman Elke isn't here, and he had some opinions on this too, so this will give an opportunity for him to have more input also.
You should be here.
Okay.
The way you put it gives us.
Anything else? All right, then I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Mayor, 6-0.
Okay, thank you, Brian.
Thank you, Mayor.
All right, do we have anything on the legislature, Ken?
Nothing at this time,
Nothing
Mayor
at this
Cavanagh.
time, they haven't
Unless
gotten...
the council members have anything that they know of that, I guess the legislature goes into session in 2 weeks from today.
Okay. Anything? Nothing? Jenny? Nothing? Okay, just making sure. Or anything else, Ken, from you? Anything else? Okay, then can I have a motion to adjourn? And a
Second.
second. And all in favor of adjournment?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, and Happy New Year again, everyone.
35 minutes. Good job. Good discussion.
Just pretty good, how are you? Just wanted to make sure.